talk about your
Yeah,
book
sure.
for a little bit.
Yeah, you
So,
bet.
um, why don't you kind of give us a timeline of when these books have come out, and maybe we'll talk about Fractured Orbit first. How'd that idea come about? How did that process look?
Yeah, so Fractured Orbit came out. The first book was published February of last year, 2023. So that was actually my seventh book that I had published. But that's okay. It's a good starting point because it's kind of where I feel like I fell into my groove of writing. So it's actually a good entry point for people reading my stuff. So um, it was actually the result of a short story that I had written. I was in a Facebook group that was putting together. It was a dystopian anthology of dystopian books or dystopian stories set in space.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd written this short story about a individual on a space station orbiting the Earth, and the Earth had died, and humanity had kind of been relegated to this space station. Um, I found out later it's kind of similar to the 100, but that hadn't fallen across my radar. It's a completely different story, but it was a similar concept. But it was more based on like kind of a silo Hugh Howey Wolf scenario, that type of thing. But it was set in space. I got to the end of the short story and I realized, there's more to this universe that I haven't explored yet, and I wanted to find out more. So once the short story was done and submitted, I actually just kept writing, and it turned into Eclipse, which is the first book in the Fractured Orbit series. So it's kind of like a Red Rising meets Wool kind of situation, and you know, again, they're set in the space station, thinking that they're the only ones left from a catastrophe in Earth's past, but they find out pretty quickly that they're not alone. I did something a little bit different with it in that there's two points of views. One is a point of view on the space station who thinks they're alone, and another one is a point of view outside of the space station from a former space pirate who's actually now transporting goods in between the space stations and the moon and further out in the solar system.
Yeah, that's cool. And then, so you have three books in that. Is that a done series? Are there more coming, or?
Yeah, there's more coming. So the first three are out now. The plan is for five. So I'm hoping to wrap that series up in the next year or two, and completely finish that up.
Nice. And then,
Yeah,
where does Bartender Between Worlds sit in all that?
yeah. So the Bartender Between Worlds is a standalone book. It's actually a separate series. It's really a cozy fantasy story. So how that came about is I got to the end of book three, and I'd published book two and three in Fractured Orbit 1 month after each other. I kind of wrote them kind of at the same time, but I kind of got ahead of myself and set up the publication date for October, November, thinking, it's all written. It'll be easy just to put it out one after another, and and it didn't go that way at all.
Yeah.
So, I totally underestimated how much editing I actually had to do with the books when I set the publication dates, and I kind of was like down to the wire hitting. By the time I got my edits back from my editor, hit upload, and so by the time I got to publishing that book, I was just like burnt out and done. Um, but I didn't want to stop writing because that's I have the writing bug now. I had to write something, but I just thought I'd take a step back and write something a little less dystopian, a little less high stakes, and try something a little cozier. So like I had mentioned, I had this idea a year ago already for this bar type setting called the Greatest Pub in the Multiverse, where um, really the initial concept came from thinking about like what would a beer look like that would be brewed from different places in the multiverse if different ingredients were kind of brought to this multidimensional pub. Um, this book ended up being kind of a prequel to that story, and it's about one of the side characters in that novel. But I just wanted to write something that was a lot more fun, lower stakes, and was really just kind of a relaxed journey. Really, it ends up being a journey through the multiverse, is what it is. So I can get into the plot a little bit about it if you want. Really, what we meet this witch hunter
Mm-hmm.
who discovers that she has magic. And so she realizes she's in a world of trouble, but her magic is really, instead of being elemental based like fire or water, it's alcohol based. So she can influence drinks, and which is lucky for her because her lifelong dream has to be a bartender. So she's always dreamt of kind of a more relaxed, slow paced job of the bartender instead of being this witch hunter who hunts monsters and hauls in witches. So she runs away to basically the farthest town in the kingdom that she possibly knows of. Um, and her witch hunter partner follows her there, tracks her down, and she meets some unlikely allies in this small town. So she meets a fairy and she meets a scientist that are really end up trying to help her out. And the scientist actually is from another world. He built this device that can traverse the multiverse, and she ends up being able to fix the device with her powers because it's kind of on the same frequency as alcohol. For whatever reason, they open a portal and are able to start traveling through the multiverse. So from there, it kind of just becomes a journey of trying to find themselves and figure out who they are and learn from each other. And it's really a fun story from there.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm really I've always been like kind of a hard hitting fantasy guy, like Brandon Sanderson and all the big just the big fantasy books. But then I read Lattes and
Legends and Lattes.
Legends and Lattes,
Yeah.
and really liked it. And then I was like, this cozy fantasy thing's not so bad. Like it's kind of
Mhm.
cool. So it's nice to take a little break from the heavy stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, this has the stakes are a little bit higher than Legends and Lattes. Legends and Lattes was almost a little too low stakes for me, but I've had complaints that the stakes are higher than what most people want out of a cozy fantasy, which is fine. I kind of knew that writing it, and I knew that putting it out there. The second book in the series, which I'm still working on now, is will be closer to that really low stakes and slice of life that Legends and Lattes is. But this book was kind of more about the journey that Emma had to go through to kind of get to where she needed to be in the second book.